In 2023, something happened in the fast food world that many thought was impossible. It was a shift comparable to Burger King suddenly surpassing McDonald's in the United States. After decades of fighting, the underdog finally did it. Popeyes' domestic sales officially surpassed KFC's. To make that even more impressive, Popeyes pulled off this victory while operating around 500 fewer locations in the US. This wasn't just a win. It was a dominant victory on a per-restaurant basis. This moment wasn't a fluke. It was the result of a 50-year war, defined by two of the most fascinating founders in food history, one catastrophic business deal, and one perfect product launch that changed everything. This is the story of how a Louisiana upstart dethroned the undisputed king of fried chicken. To understand the war, you have to understand the kings. First, the Colonel. KFC's story starts with Harland Sanders, a man who had worked a dozen different jobs by the time he was 40. In 1929, he was running a gas station in Kentucky, where he started selling fried chicken to his customers. He perfected his secret recipe of 11 herbs and spices, and by the 1950s, he was traveling the country, convincing restaurant owners to open their own Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises. By 1964, KFC was already a national chain with hundreds of locations, and Sanders sold the company to an investor group. He remained the brand's ambassador, and that investor group, and the owners that followed, built KFC into a global juggernaut. By the 1970s, KFC wasn't just the biggest fried chicken chain. It was one of the biggest restaurants of any kind in the United States. They were the golden standard. Then came the challenger. The founder of Popeyes, Al Copeland, had a surprisingly similar backstory. He grew up poor in New Orleans after his father left, and he dropped out of high school at 16. He eventually opened his own donut franchise, but he saw where the real money was. In the early 70s, KFC was opening locations in his Louisiana neighborhood. Copeland said, "Here I was in a donut shop, breaking my butt, and Kentucky Fried Chicken came in at 11, closed at 8, and was doing 4 times the businesses." He had an idea. If I can come up with a better tasting fried chicken, I can beat these guys. His first attempt in 1971 was a restaurant called Chicken on the Run. It failed. Expenses were about $2,000 a week, and he was only making $1,100. He was in serious trouble. So he shut it down and made 2 genius changes. First, he fiddled with the recipe to make it spicier, giving it the distinct Louisiana Cajun flavor we know today. This was brilliant. He wasn't trying to beat KFC at their own game. He was creating a new one, appealing to his local customers. The second change was the name. He reopened as Popeyes Mighty Good Fried Chicken. Now, for 35 years, Popeyes used the cartoon sailor in its ads, but the restaurant isn't named after him. It was 1972, and Al Copeland had supposedly just seen the Best Picture winner, The French Connection. He claims he named the restaurant after its main character, Detective Popeye Doyle. He also joked that he was too poor to afford the apostrophe. The new recipe and new name worked. In his 3rd week, he finally turned a profit. By 1977, there were 50 Popeyes locations, and by 1985, there were 500. This brings us to the first major battle. By the late 1980s, the fried chicken industry had a clear hierarchy. KFC was untouchable at number 1. Church's Chicken was number 2, and Popeyes was the fast-growing number 3. Al Copeland was not a humble man like Colonel Sanders. He was, in a word, extravagant. He was famous in New Orleans for his ridiculous Christmas light displays, which had over 1 million lights and caused so much traffic his neighbors sued him. He applied that same extravagant logic to his business. In 1988, Copeland made a shocking move. He launched a hostile takeover attempt to buy Church's Chicken, the number 2 chain. The deal was messy, but months later they agreed to merge. Copeland agreed to buy over 30 million shares, valuing the deal at nearly $400 million. There was one problem. Al Copeland did not have $400 million. He financed the deal by borrowing about $450 million, which came with massive interest payments. The motivation was unclear. Maybe he thought he could turn Church's around, which was already struggling. Maybe it was an aggressive, well-thought-out move. Or maybe, like his Christmas lights, it was just extravagant. The result was a disaster. The newly combined company was paying over $50 million a year in interest alone. Church's continued to struggle. By late 1990, the company could no longer afford its debt payments. In April 1991, Popeyes filed for bankruptcy. The company was taken away from its founder, Al Copeland. A new parent company called America's Favorite Chicken, or AFC, was formed to manage both Popeyes and Church's. Copeland did, however, have one last trick. Years earlier, he had transferred the rights to the famous spicy recipe to a separate company he owned. So, for years, the company that had just kicked him out had to pay him $3.1 million every year just to use his recipe, a deal that lasted until they finally bought the rights in 2014. For the next 2 decades, the two chains went down completely different paths. KFC, now owned by Yum Brands, focused on the world. Its international business exploded, especially in China, where it now has over 10,000 locations, almost 3 times as many as in the US. KFC in America became an afterthought. Its stores got old, the quality was seen as inconsistent, and rivals started chipping away at its dominance. As one video noted, the brand in America became known for cheap, uncreative, with a boring menu. In 2016, KFC launched a rekernelization plan to try and win back America. They mandated chicken mastery retraining for all 20,000 operators and launched new flavors like Nashville Hot. But it was too little, too late. Their big attempt at a chicken sandwich, the Zinger, was a huge international hit, but failed to catch on in the US. Meanwhile, Popeyes was on a slow, grinding comeback. AFC hired new leadership to turn the company around. They focused on strengthening the brand, and in 2017, the entire company was bought by Restaurant Brands International, the same people who own Burger King. They were investing, and they were looking for a way to strike. That strike came in August 2019. For years, Chick-fil-A had been dominating the chicken sandwich space, surpassing KFC in sales over a decade ago. Both KFC and Popeyes had tried and failed to make a dent. Then, Popeyes introduced the chicken sandwich, a simple brioche bun, pickles, and that spicy chicken. It was an instant hit. A small Twitter feud with Chick-fil-A sparked what became known as the Chicken Sandwich Wars. The attention was massive. Popeyes was selling more sandwiches than ever before. They completely sold out for a while. KFC waited over a year to launch its own best chicken sandwich ever. But the sensation was over. Popeyes had won. That single sandwich elevated Popeyes to a new level. It closed the sales gap that had existed for 40 years. It brought in new customers. And those customers, it turned out, also liked their bone-in chicken. Which brings us back to 2023. Popeyes finally surpassed KFC in the US. KFC is still a global monster. With over 30,000 locations worldwide, it is about 6 times larger than Popeyes overall. It is the king of China, Japan, and much of the rest of the world. But in the United States, the country that birthed them both, the war is over. KFC, through decades of international focus, let its home turf fall into disrepair. Popeyes, after falling into bankruptcy, clawed its way back for 30 years, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. And with one sandwich, they finally took the crown. So I'm curious to hear what you think. Is this a story of KFC's failure, or one of Popeyes' brilliant comeback? And now that Popeyes is on top in the US, what do they have to do to stay there? Let me know in the comments.